I'm Nina Schick. I'm an author and an expert on generative AI. Right now, I work with startups in the generative AI space, as well as publicly tell the story of how this new form of artificial intelligence is basically going to, I think, present a tipping point in human evolution. It's going to change everything. Well, ChatGPT is the most prolific story about generative AI. It is basically a text generation tool started by OpenAI, one of the companies leading in this space. And it is a large language model. So ChatGPT has been trained on a vast amount of text so that if you interface with ChatGPT, you can ask it something. You can ask it to write an essay. You can ask it to write a script. You can ask it to write 10 talking points for a talk about ChatGPT. It will generate that for you. And why it is so important is because it shows how artificial intelligence is going to fundamentally change the way that we think about human creativity or human intelligent output, because increasingly AI is getting so good that can do a lot of the thinking and the production for us. Right now, ChatGPT can write essays, but there are many other kind of generative AI tools that can create images, that can create video, that can write SEO, that can write marketing. Anything, as I said, that is unique to human intelligence or creativity is increasingly powered by artificial intelligence. Well, it's difficult to think of something that is so fundamental in terms of the future of human communication, human perception, and the world of work. So what's interesting with the AI and the generative AI revolution is that this isn't hypothetical anymore. This isn't science fiction, but this is happening now. With regards to generative AI, it's being developed as this kind of application layer, which is going to roll out as software and be changing workflows, processes right now. I mean, it's starting right now, where, for instance, if you're a big multinational company, you'll be looking at generative AI as a new tool for like content creation, everything for go-to-market, everything to do with customer service. It might be a large language model that's generating text. You might be using generative AI to generate images for your brand. Every single workflow can be expedited by generative AI. So this poses a really interesting and philosophical question, and that is that, will AI augment us or automate us? And there's going to be a lot of fears, I think, that AI is going to basically automate us, that we're going to lose jobs. And I think some jobs will be lost. But there's also going to be a huge new opportunity for people to create new content, to create new ideas with the help of AI. I actually think there's a future where AI is going to augment our creativity and intelligence. And so when you think about communication, if you consider that most of the content, I predict that 90% of online content by 2025 is going to be generated by AI. If you predict most digital content is going to be created by AI, it's, again, difficult to think of something more seismic in terms of a communication revolution. And ultimately, all of this, the way that we work, the way that we communicate, is going to be transformed by AI, which is also going to change our perception of the world. So we had kind of the internet revolution, we had the smartphone revolution, but for both of those, you needed infrastructure, you needed hardware. The AI revolution that's coming, you don't need any of those. It's just going to be delivered as a software, and it's happening already now. So generative AI is a really recent new field of artificial intelligence. It's less than 10 years old. And essentially, what generative AI can do is generate something. AI can actually create something new. And the fact that this is now possible is truly astonishing. And when you look at generative AI, the advances are exponential. So we've already started to see the first signs of how it's going to change our world through an interface like ChatGPT, which has universal applications. But generative AI isn't just restricted to text generation, as in the case of ChatGPT. It's also it's also across all content creation and all knowledge creation. So we are only at the very, very, very beginning of this journey. These models are going to increasingly get better and better and better. So I think that generative AI is going to become basically the most important story of our lifetime because of how quickly and rapidly it's going to change the world. So I think this fundamentally comes down to the question of, will AI automate us or augment us? And I know that there's going to be a lot of fear that AI is going to automate us. And it's true, because for the first time, AI can be used to do white-collar jobs. For example, if you train a large language model on a corpus of legal text, now you have a model that can generate really complicated legal text, work that would have been, just until a few years ago, the domain of very well-qualified, well-trained lawyers, now being replaced by AI. So for some of these tasks, AI will definitely automate what is currently in the realm of human intelligence or creativity. But you can also consider how this unleashes your power as a creative or intellectual being, because now if you have tools that allow you to generate text, that allow you to generate research, that allow you from the idea to actually create something, all that you really need is an idea, and then you can use AI as a tool to realize that idea. I mean, I'm an author, I use things like ChatGPT, but now I can also use video generation tools, I can also use image generation tools. My essential craft is telling a story. And by using AI tools, I can make my story so much more compelling, so much more immersive. So this is the balance that I think is going to become hugely controversial, but I think it's important to recognize that it isn't only that AI is going to automate us, it's going to give us so many new creative opportunities, possibilities. And aside from creativity, it's also going to be used to generate a whole lot of new knowledge, things that we haven't even conceived of yet. I think that every corporation, every industry is fundamentally going to be transformed by generative AI, because, as I already mentioned, generative AI is going to be a fundamental piece of the digital ecosystem going forward. It's going to be a fundamental piece of the internet. It can really be thought of as an infrastructure for communication, knowledge generation, and information. So if you think about it as a key building block of the information ecosystem itself, every single corporation and every industry is going to have to evolve and, based on the industry that you're in, have to think of developing a generative AI strategy. So for instance, it could be something as huge as, like, what is your content strategy? What is your go-to-market strategy? How do you deal with your customers? How do you do R&D? All of these fields are going to be impacted by generative AI. So it's not just a vertical, but it's a horizontal across every single industry, across society, really, because it's a key fundamental building block of the internet ecosystem going forward. Well, there's going to be a tremendous amount of abundance. And according to some of the early figures we already see coming out of the space, for instance, Microsoft has just invested $10 billion in OpenAI, one of the first kind of leading generative AI companies. The multiples in terms of, like, the billions of dollars of value that are going to be generated in this space by 2030, I think are going to be absolutely huge. I have no doubt that the next trillion-dollar company is going to be in this space, simply because of how universal the applications are. You see that already with kind of the big tech companies pivoting their entire strategy to straddle generative AI as a core part of their strategy. So I think that the businesses, like the tech businesses, already recognize how fundamental this shift is going to be. So for me, it's not a question of will there be abundance due to generative AI? There's going to be a tremendous amount of abundance. The question is, how do we distribute that in a way where it isn't monopolized by a few big players? And here you're going to see a debate between the open source community and some of the kind of private tech companies, which arguably are trying to centralize and control some of these foundational models. And I think that's going to become a huge political debate. On the government side, the problem is more that these technologies are accelerating and evolving so quickly. I mean, I have a policy background. I've worked with many different governments and political leaders. Can they keep up with the pace of change? And do they actually understand what's at stake here? For me, the most kind of existential and fundamental question is, can generative AI be deployed as infrastructure for humanity so that everyone has access to the power of generative AI, rather than this becomes a very powerful set of tools and technologies that are monopolized by a few well-resourced actors? And I think that's going to ultimately be the most important question. Yeah, so I really conceive of deepfakes as the first kind of viral form of generative AI. So deepfakes being manipulated imagery or video or fake audio or content of someone saying or doing something that they didn't do. When deepfakes first started arising and at the end of kind of 2017, they started in pornography, because everything pioneering seems to start in porn. They weren't scalable. But what you're seeing now is scalability with these new foundational models. So what you're going to see going forward is so much content and so much noise, because not everything that's generated by AI is going to be, there's going to be just so much rubbish. So that kind of trying to navigate the information ecosystem for content that is trustworthy, for content that is correct, for content that isn't spam, is going to become increasingly difficult. So the information ecosystem is going to become a lot noisier. And now that there's this new element of scale of AI generated content, what's going to happen is that people will start to lose trust in the medium of media itself. So is that a real video? I don't know. Is that from the BBC? I don't know. I think it's fake. So there is no kind of basis of understanding what's real and what's fake, which has very existential kind of consequences politically, but also, I mean, if you're a business trying to operate in an ecosystem where you simply don't know what content you can and can't trust, it's existential. So we have to look at solutions like detecting AI generated content. So just like you have in your Gmail inbox right now, all kinds of spam filters, it'll probably be the same for AI generated content. But also, if you're a good actor, if you are a brand, for example, that wants to put out AI generated content, to think about authenticating content, even if it's made by AI, to show, well, this actually comes from us. This comes from our brand. This is our AI made content. This isn't just some kind of spam content, is going to become so fundamental. So it's going to get noisier. There's going to be lots of disinformation and misinformation, but even more than that, just a lot of rubbish AI generated content. And cutting through the noise through detection and authentication is going to have to become a fundamental business practice, and actually something that all nation states need to look at too. Business leaders, I think the first thing you need to do is just conceptualize of the scale of what's happening here and understand how revolutionary it is, so that kind of old prescriptions or old ways about thinking about things no longer work. It's time to rip it up and go back to the drawing board. The second thing to say is you really need to understand the new kind of risk vectors that are arising in terms of how you as an individual or how your entity is going to be targeted, or what kind of new risks are arising in this rapidly changing ecosystem. But the final point is that it's also tremendously exciting. I mean, generative AI is going to create so much abundance. It's going to create so many new opportunities for creativity, for intelligent output, aside from understanding kind of what the new risk vectors are, it's also time to really map out what are the opportunities, because I have no doubt that the companies that are really going to understand this are going to put themselves at a huge advantage. And the time to do that isn't in 6 months, it isn't in 5 years, it's now, because it's all happening right now. Busy year, definitely. So I'm going to continue working with some of the foundational companies in this space, advising them, but increasingly also working with the brands and companies who are seeking to build generative AI strategies to navigate this new world.